The room was silent except for the faint hum of the alien ship's engines, a low vibration that made the metal floor beneath her legs tremble. The girl sat with her back against the cold wall, wrists bound but posture steady, her eyes never leaving the aliens who circled her backpack. They had taken it from her the moment she was captured, treating it as though it might hold a hidden weapon, though to her it was little more than a lifeline of memories. The Koran soldiers, tall reptilian beings with gray scales and eyes like molten amber, tipped the contents out one by one, speaking in harsh whispers. A notebook with human handwriting fell open, sketches of ships and stars filling its pages. A cracked slate flickered weakly with saved messages, the last fragment of a family she might never see again. There was a small keychain, a trinket worth nothing to them but priceless to her, worn smooth from years of being turned over in her palm when she was anxious. They hissed dismissively at these things, amused by what they saw as the sentimental clutter of a fragile species. But then one soldier reached deeper and withdrew a piece of folded fabric. He unfurled it, expecting perhaps a blanket or worn clothing. Instead, the dim lights of the chamber caught the sharp insignia stitched onto the shoulder. The moment the commander's gaze fell upon it, his scales rippled, paling from gray to ashen white. The other soldiers froze, their bodies stiffening, their voices dying in their throats. The fabric was heavy with meaning, not to them perhaps, but to the history their kind had inherited. It was a human uniform, not a civilian, but of a corps whispered about in war stories and half-remembered nightmares, the kind of stories told around military fires to frighten new recruits. The girl's lips curved almost imperceptibly, not in arrogance, but in quiet recognition of the fear that passed through her captors. She said nothing, letting the silence stretch, her steady gaze more unsettling than any words. The commander dropped the uniform as though it burned him, his claws trembling as they hovered above the table. He exchanged a glance with his subordinates, his voice low and strained as he muttered a phrase none of them wanted to admit. "She carries the mark of them." The others looked away, their confidence faltering, because even the Koran, predators of 100 conquered worlds, knew the stories of humans who wore that insignia. They were not stories of defeat, but of battles where the impossible had been turned against the darkness, where the relentless spirit of humankind had bled into every scar of the galaxy. The girl straightened her back, her bonds creaking, and though she remained silent, the weight of her presence in that moment felt far larger than her small frame. For the first time since her capture, it was not she who looked like the prisoner, but the aliens who seemed trapped in a chamber with something they had never learned how to fight. Hope, carried in the form of a folded uniform, and the unbreakable will of the species that had worn it. The commander's claws scraped against the metal table as he steadied himself, forcing his trembling hands to still. The soldiers around him muttered nervously, their tongues clicking against sharp teeth, their voices pitched too low for the girl to hear. But she didn't need to hear them. She could see the fear written in every flick of their tails, in the way their bodies hunched instinctively away from the uniform lying between them. One of the younger soldiers finally broke the silence. "It could be a trick," he hissed, his voice strained. "Fabric stitched to deceive. Humans are clever that way." The commander turned his head sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Do you doubt what stands before you? Do you doubt the mark?" His voice carried weight, but it was thinner than before, as though fear had hollowed out its usual strength. The soldier bowed his head, but did not answer. The girl shifted slightly, the metal cuffs biting into her wrists. She felt the pulse in her throat hammering, but she held their gaze with an expression that betrayed nothing of her fear. Her father had once told her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to stand when every instinct begged you to flee. That lesson was written into her bones, and now, in this chamber surrounded by enemies, she clung to it like a lifeline. The commander gestured for one of his aides. The aide hurried forward, scanning the insignia with a sleek device. Alien symbols flickered across its surface, calculations unraveling until the display froze on a single result. The aide's throat sacs pulsed rapidly. "Confirmed," he croaked, his voice almost breaking. "The insignia matches historical records. Human Expeditionary Corps Unit 7. The ones they called," he hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper, "the Ghost Walkers." The commander's eyes closed for a long moment, as if the weight of that name was almost too much to bear. Ghostwalkers, the humans who had turned hopeless wars into desperate victories, who had disappeared into blackest space only to re-emerge where no enemy expected them, striking with ruthless precision. They were the humans who had left scars not on planets, but on the collective memory of every species they had fought. And those centuries had passed since the last Ghostwalker was seen. Their legend lingered like a shadow that no light could erase. The girl tilted her head, watching the realization spread across the aliens' faces. She had never worn the uniform herself. It had belonged to her mother, passed down with reverence, folded carefully into her pack before she left Earth. Her mother had been one of them, a ghost walker who never returned from a mission that was only whispered about in her family. Carrying the uniform had been an act of remembrance, a promise to never forget. She had never imagined it would be the thing that turned her captors pale. One of the younger soldiers finally stepped back, shaking his head. "We cannot keep her here," he said, his voice sharp with fear. "If she is kin to them, if the blood of Ghostwalkers runs through her." He stopped, his eyes darting to the girl, as if even speaking the words might summon something he couldn't control. The commander opened his eyes, and in them was a storm of conflict. Anger, fear, and something dangerously close to respect. He leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "Human," he said, switching to her language with surprising fluency. "Do you know what you carry? Do you understand the name that uniform bears?" The girl's lips parted, and for the first time since her capture, she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, but steady as steel beneath it. "I know exactly what it means. I know who wore it, and I know why you're afraid." Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The soldiers shifted uneasily, some snarling under their breath, others stepping back farther as if her voice carried more than just sound. The commander's jaw tightened. He wanted to strike her, to crush the defiance from her small frame. But deep down, in some ancient instinctive part of him, he knew it would not change what she represented. Killing her would not erase the fear of the Ghostwalkers. It would only confirm it, that even a child could carry their shadow into the heart of his ship. The commander leaned back, his claws tapping against the table. His gaze lingered on the folded uniform, then on the girl, and at last he spoke, his words almost reverent despite the hiss that carried them. "Perhaps the galaxy has forgotten what your kind truly is," he said slowly. "But I have not, and I see now neither have you." The girl lifted her chin, her eyes burning with quiet fire. "Humans don't forget," she said softly, "and we don't quit." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The weight of her words pressed into the chamber, heavy and undeniable. The uniform lay between them like a relic, not just of the past, but a promise that the future still belonged to her people. The commander dismissed the subordinates with a wave of his clawed hand, his eyes never leaving the girl. The soldiers hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances, then filed out one by one until only the two of them remained. The chamber felt larger now, the silence heavier, as though even the ship itself was listening. The commander leaned forward, resting his scaled arms on the table, his voice low and deliberate. "You speak boldly for one so young," he said, his words thick with suspicion. "Do you think that name alone can shield you? Ghostwalker." His tongue flicked as he hissed the word, tasting the fear that accompanied it. "Your kind believes too much in symbols." The girl's gaze never wavered. "Symbols are powerful because they remind us who we are," she answered quietly. "That uniform isn't just cloth. It's a memory of what humans have already survived. It's proof that no matter how dark it gets, we find a way to fight back." The commander's eyes narrowed. He wanted to dismiss her words as bravado, but deep in his mind flickered memories he wished he could bury. He had been a hatchling when the first stories reached the core and homeworld, carried by broken fleets and trembling survivors of battles where humans had turned certain defeat into incomprehensible victories. He remembered the old veteran speaking in hushed tones about men and women who vanished in the void only to reappear behind enemy lines, tearing apart fleets from the inside out. The ghost walkers had been few, but their impact had been disproportionate, leaving scars that never healed. "You think your ancestors make you untouchable," the commander said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Legends die. Even ghost walkers vanish into the dark eventually." The girl leaned forward slightly, her bound hands resting against her knees. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but the certainty in it cut through the stale air. Legends don't die. They wait. They remind those who fear them that we are never as far away as you hope. My mother wore that uniform. She never came back. But the stories of what she did remain. You know them. That's why you can't even touch the fabric without trembling. The commander's jaw tightened, his scaled fingers curling into fists. She was right, and it infuriated him. He had faced human soldiers before, but they were always desperate, ragged things, clawing for survival on broken colonies. Yet this girl, bound and surrounded, carried herself as if the entire weight of humanity's spirit stood behind her. It was not logical, but it was undeniable. He rose slowly, walking around the table until he stood over her. His shadow swallowed her small frame, but she tilted her chin higher, refusing to bow. For a long moment he studied her, the silence stretching. Then he crouched until his amber eyes were level with hers. "If you are lying," he murmured, his breath hot and bitter, "I will tear this ship apart piece by piece to find the truth. If you speak truth," then he stopped, the rest of the sentence lost in his throat. To admit it aloud would be to acknowledge something his kind had sworn never believe again, that humans could still inspire fear. The door hissed open suddenly, and one of his officers rushed in, scales rippling with agitation. "Commander," he barked, "we've intercepted a transmission. Human resistance cells are moving in this sector. They're searching for a missing operative." His eyes flicked to the girl, then to the folded uniform still on the table. His throat pulsed nervously. The description matches her. The commander's gaze snapped back to the girl, and for the first time her faint smile widened into something sharper, almost triumphant. "I told you," she said softly. "We don't forget our own. They'll come." The officer shifted uneasily, his claws flexing. "If the resistance is truly this close, Commander, we must decide. She is dangerous, even in chains." The commander stood slowly, his cloak sweeping across the floor. His eyes lingered on the insignia one last time, then on the girl who sat before him with unshaken resolve. He should have ordered her execution, should have silenced a name that made his soldiers pale. But instead, he found himself hesitating, and in that hesitation was the crack of fear spreading wider through the iron discipline of his kind. The girl saw it. She leaned back against the wall, her expression calm, her voice steady as she whispered the words that had carried her people through centuries of impossible odds. "You can try to break me. You can try to bury what I carry. But you'll never stop what's coming. Because humans don't quit." For a heartbeat, the commander stared at her, his scales rippling with unease. Then he turned sharply on his heel, snapping to his officer, "Increase security, double the guard, and not a word about what was found in that pack leaves this room." His voice was harsher than ever, but beneath it lingered the one truth he could not erase. A single girl, carrying nothing but uniform and her own defiance, had shaken the resolve of an entire warship. The girl waited in her cell, the hum of the alien ship vibrating faintly through the walls. Hours passed, or perhaps days, time blurred in the silence. But she knew something the commander's soldiers didn't. Humans had a way of finding each other in the dark, and her people wouldn't abandon her. Outside the cell, the guards shifted uneasily. They pretended discipline, standing tall with their sleek weapons in hand, but their eyes betrayed them. Every so often, their gazes would dart to the cell door, as though expecting the ghost walker uniform to burst through it on its own. Fear was an infection, and it spread quickly. Even whispers had begun, mutters among the crew about curses, about omens. Some claimed they'd heard footsteps in the halls where no one walked, or shadows moving where the lights burned bright. The girl said nothing, but each time the guards met her steady eyes, their hands tightened on their weapons. On the third cycle, the ship shuddered. Not the smooth tremor of faster-than-light drives, but the jarring impact of something colliding against its hull. Klaxons blared in alien tones, filling the corridors with shrill urgency. Guards shouted into their communicators, their voices tight with panic. The girl sat straighter, her chest rising with quiet relief. They had come. Through the metal door, muffled but unmistakable, came the sound of human ingenuity at work. Loud, chaotic, utterly unpredictable. A hacking spike driven into the alien system made alarms flicker. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but then just as suddenly opened again as if confused about their orders. Lights dimmed, flared, then died, plunging parts of the ship into shadow. The commander stormed into the tension wing, his cloak flaring behind him, his eyes blazing with rage. "Contain them," he roared at the soldiers. "Do not let them breach this level." His voice cracked with a note his warriors weren't used to hearing from him, desperation. But the girl smiled. She heard the faint scrape of metal from a ventilation shaft above her cell. Then a voice, low, sharp, and familiar, filtered through the duct. "Hold tight, kid. We're cutting you out." A spark of recognition flooded her. They weren't just resistance fighters. These were her mother's comrades, the scattered remnants of Ghostwalker units that had refused to die with the legends. The cell door hissed and whined as a plasma cutter bit into it from the other side. The commander turned sharply, fury burning in his eyes. "No!" he snarled, lunging forward. But before he could reach the door, the ventilation grill above shattered outward. A figure dropped into the room, armored and patched, but unmistakably human combat gear, visor gleaming in the dim light. With practiced speed, the intruder leveled a weapon at the commander. Step away from the girl. For a moment, everything froze, the guards hesitating, the commander glaring, the girl watching with a heart pounding like a drum. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire and plasma bolts lit the corridor, the shriek of alien voices mixing with the deep, measured bursts of human rifles. The rescuer shoved the cell door open from the inside, pulling the girl to her feet. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice clipped but urgent. "Can you run?" She nodded, clutching the folded uniform to her chest. "I can run." The commander surged forward with a roar, claws outstretched, but the rescuer slammed the butt of his rifle into the alien's chest, staggering him. "Move!" the soldier barked, dragging the girl into the smoke-filled hallway. The ship was a battlefield now. Humans fought with a wild, improvised brilliance that had made them infamous. Overloaded conduits turned into weapons, maintenance drones reprogrammed mid-fight, even scraps of pipe and wire wielded as tools of sabotage. The aliens had discipline, numbers, and technology, but none of it seemed to hold against the humans' chaotic resourcefulness. Every corridor became a trap, every shadow a threat. The girl ran beside her rescuer, weaving through the flashing lights and the deafening clash of battle. Everywhere she looked, humans fought with a kind of desperation that wasn't born from fear. It was born from something stronger, hope. Behind them, the commander staggered his feet, his chest heaving, his claws dripping with rage. His soldiers fell back under the relentless pressure, their formation crumbling. He stared after the fleeing humans, his mind a storm of fury and something worse, dread. Because as he watched the girl vanish into the smoke, clutching the uniform of a Ghostwalker, he understood what the stories had always meant. Humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't follow the rules of war. They adapted, they endured, and above all, they refused to quit. And if one girl could reignite the name of the Ghostwalkers, then the war he thought was already won had only just begun.